Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Robert Dietz, the chief economist with the NAHB, the National Association of Home Builders. Robert, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
I wanted to talk about where we are in the housing market today, but before we get there, I'd kind of like to set the stage. You know, at the beginning of the year, January of 2020, we were finally seeing a new construction pace of 1.5 million starts. That's both single and multifamily. And, I'd like to point out that in the whole last decade, we never got there. And when we look at household formations, that's a healthy pace and a sustainable pace. So we had some pent-up demand, we're pulling forward, and then COVID came, right?
Yeah, that's right. We spent about 10 years experiencing what we like to characterize as the long recovery. Multifamily starts had gotten up to about 400,000 pace.
Yeah.
But single-family starts had really lagged over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And a lot of that was due to the fact that we had a persistent labor shortage. We had some financing issues with home builders. And the impact of that was that the demographics were turning in our favor. Millennials were aging in growing numbers. But the lack of housing supply really was pushing up rents and pushing up home prices, which was good if you were a homeowner, but bad if you were someone trying to become a homeowner.
Yeah.
And so that created a housing affordability challenge by the end of the last decade.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that millennial word because I think that was a fact. My wife and I actually created two millennials ourselves. They have different priorities. And I think ultimately they'll get back to housing. But for a while it was about experiences and travel and things that were probably unlike the boomers. So I think that was probably another factor.
It was. I'm a Gen Xer, so I think I'm kind of straddling both those worlds. But one of the things that was true about the millennials, and they are the largest generational group, they're even larger than the baby boomers, was that they were doing everything a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
So they were going to school longer, they were getting married later, they were having kids later, and certainly they were becoming homeowners later. I think one of the things that we might see change as a result of the COVID crisis is a focus on some of those long-term goals. So I'm not necessarily forecasting, for example, a baby boom coming over the next year or two, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see birth rates go up.
Yeah.
And we're certainly seeing it in housing demand. Housing demand has been a relative bright spot in the overall economy. We've had 9 straight weeks of gains for mortgage purchase applications. Home building has done better than expected, particularly in May and April. And for those reasons, we do think that housing is going to help lead a recovery for the overall economy.
All right. Well, that was the anticipation all along. So we're way down from where we thought we were going to be. Give us a feel for where we are today.
Yeah, as you said at the beginning, January and February, at least on a seasonally adjusted basis, had really strong numbers for home building. I think we were all expecting 2020 to be the best year since the Great Recession, which was our housing-focused recession. And then the COVID crisis happens, and this particular recession is much more focused in commercial real estate, which means it's going to have a larger impact on multifamily than it will on single-family. Mm-hmm. But I think if we look at the data, and a good way of sort of gauging where we are in terms of both the decline and the eventual rebound is to take the NAHB Wells Fargo Housing Market Index, which is our builder confidence measure. In June, it came in at a level of 58. Mm-hmm. Any level above 50 is considered positive. Yeah. And it was a really dramatic improvement over the numbers that we saw in May when it was at a level of 37. So it jumped 21 points. That was the biggest monthly gain we've ever had in the history of the index, which goes back about 25 years. And what it's telling us is that we're hearing builders say new home sales are good, existing home listings are down, and so the result is that we're going to see a pickup in single-family starts. And we got a little bit of evidence of that in the May data. Single-family permits were up more than 10%. So builders are definitely beginning to pull permits now to step up the pace of single-family construction.
Okay, so the last time you got a good read, were we at about 600,000? What was the annualized rate?
Yeah, so the single-family starts pace in the last reading was right around 675,000 starts.
Okay.
Now, where do we think it's going to go?
Yeah.
We think it's going to increase this year, pushing us to a total that'll likely be somewhere around, say, 760,000 total starts, maybe a little bit higher. Next year, in 2021, as long as we avoid a really big, massive second wave of the virus that would cause additional shutdowns, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll see localized flare-ups. But as long as we avoid that, I think next year we'll see single-family starts get close to 900,000. Mm-hmm. We think this is kind of a 2-year type recovery. And then by 2022, we might finally see single-family starts get to the 1 million pace. Yeah. And we think 1.1 million is ultimately where we need to go for demographics. So that would put us there in 2023. So I think 2021 and 2022 look like promising years for single-family construction. But it's not just the total number of homes that we're going to build, it's the kind of homes. Yeah. And one of the things that we're beginning to see some hints of evidence of right now is that home size is going up. So we're going to need more materials to put in these new homes.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was wondering about, because if somebody's going to work at home, spend more time in the house, they're going to want a bigger house, right?
That's right. And the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen declines in median new home size. And some of that was a composition effect, that you saw builders building out the entry-level part of inventory. So that was pushing the median, or the home right in the middle of the distribution, that home size down. But what we're going to see going forward is, due to more people working at home, due to the fact that a third of the American workforce was telecommuting for months at a time, which was a kind of a real-time experiment in about 2 months, probably accomplishing about 10 years of work social change in that period of time, they're going to need home office space. We're going to need, at least according to some of the surveys, more space for home exercise equipment. Mm-hmm. We're going to need more space for what kids are increasingly doing at home, given that a lot of children essentially were studying at home. So all these factors, I think, for consumers mean that the importance of home has been reemphasized. Many of them found the challenges in their existing housing. So whether they're moving and buying a new home, relocating within an existing metro, or remodeling an existing home, we think all of those things are going to help push new home size up. And we could see some design changes, too. Maybe, I'm not going to say we're at the end of the open concept floor plan, but you might have some people rethinking that and saying, hey, some walls, doors are important if everyone is working and studying at home.
Yeah, actually, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about that. They were saying this, a lot of these upper-end homes had big open environments, and they were thinking, well, if both the wife and I are going to be at the house, we're going to need some walls. So
that's right.
All right. One other quick trend, I'm just curious, if you're looking way out, and I know this is probably maybe too soon to tell, but are we seeing a shift from this urban back to rural? What do you think?
We are, and actually, so this is something that we've been tracking really closely. I've been really proud of my team. We developed a geographic tracking of home construction conditions about 1.5 years ago. We call it the Home Building Geography Index, or HBGI. And what we saw in the first quarter data for 2020, which is the most recent we have available, is that the small metros, small towns, and rural markets were growing faster than the larger metropolitan areas in terms of single-family construction. So that trend was already in place as we went into the year. It was consistent with what we saw in March. And then my expectation when we get the second quarter data, which will be in early fall of this year, that those trends will continue. And the reason those trends were in place were housing affordability headwinds. You just had a lot of people. I know, for example, my own family, my sister-in-law moved from New York City, and she moved to Nashville. Yeah. And the reason she did that was housing affordability.
Right.
So that the trend was in place, and I think as people recognize that the single-family, suburban home, that kind of neighborhood, proved to be resilient during a public health crisis because it is less dependent on subways and mass transit. Yeah. It's less dense. Consumers are going to vote with their feet, and we're seeing that right now. So I think we're going to see a change in the mix of geography of home construction, and that gets back to what I was saying earlier, where multifamily is going to be more strongly affected. It's going to take longer to recover, while single family is likely to be a leading element of the economy.
All right, Robert. Well, I appreciate you giving us a read on this. It's all good information. Again, been talking to Robert Dietz, the chief economist with the NAHB, and you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.